Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, August 25th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Maryland and redistricting across the state. That Governor Wes Moore is now telling the press that he is actively looking into options for the Maryland legislature to redraw their congressional boundaries ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Now, Maryland is a state that is blue through and through. It's my home state. We've talked about it a lot, and recently on this channel, we had the opportunity to interview Governor Wes Moore. If you want to check that out, it's up on the channel. But the focus here and the reason why I talk about it being such a blue state is because Democrats already have the upper hand when it comes down to the congressional districts that have been drawn and put in place since the 2020 census. Democrats won the most recent elections in the state of Maryland with 7 seats, so the Republicans got just 1 on the eastern side of the state. In 2022, very similar results here. Republicans won 1 seat, Democrats won 7, and across the board here, we were finding the Democrats are drawn into pretty compact districts that do ultimately maximize the amount of support that Democrats receive in these congressional boundaries. However, there's an opportunity here for Democrats to draw out Andy Harris, who serves on the House Freedom Caucus and is one of the more MAGA members of the Republican delegation that Democrats have looked to for a long time as an opportunity to take him out of office. Andy Harris has been in here for quite a long time. You'll find that his election happened in 2010, around the time the Tea Party was ushering in an anti-Obama era, and Andy Harris won by about 12 points. They then redrew the maps into a way that he won by 36 points by the next election, and then in 2014, won by 41, in 2016, won by 38, in 2018, won by 22, in 2020, won by 27. I promise there's a point to this. And then in 2022, the newly drawn maps by Democrats here ended up with Andy Harris winning by 11, and in 2024, he won by 22. But Democrats have actually tried to draw out Andy Harris before. This map here that was implemented by the Democratic legislature was not actually the first map that they wanted to see come through. The Republicans had a map that was much less fortunate for their political party when Democrats steamrolled through a piece of legislation that passed a congressional map that took Maryland's 1st district from being a Trump double-digit district into being a dead-even district, and the rest became slightly less Democratic. But that was met with opposition. A Maryland judge ultimately threw out the congressional map, and that was it. By that point, Democrats were too late in the game. It was mid-March of 2022. They had already postponed their congressional primaries in anticipation that this map would have, needed to be redrawn, and it did get redrawn. And yes, Democrats did get it in a way that they were able to get 7 seats here. But Democrats actually don't love this map. That's because in 2020, if you look at that map, Democrats didn't have any competitive seats. They didn't have to worry about any congressional districts that were competitive. Every single one was safe for the Democratic Party with one explicit Republican vote dump. And this gerrymander arguably was, extremely, extremely intense. Take a look at some of these districts and the way they are drawn. They are carved and cut in a way that is meant to be so beneficial for the Democratic Party, and obviously it worked. It took districts and made them Democrat plus 36, Democrat plus 39, Democrat plus 44, Democrat plus 37, plus 20, plus 38. This is my district. You are looking at it, and then one again, Republican vote dump. And so what Democrats would likely do is, based on the way that Maryland has, laws around their congressional districts, would have to draw in certain portions of Annapolis and areas that are much more Democratic than the Eastern Shoreboard. And you're going to find that this area, Maryland's 1st, is going to contain probably some of these regions in Maryland's 5th district and Maryland's 3rd district. The point is that I'm trying to make is that it would immediately shift this district into being one that might not be safe for the Democratic Party, but a lot better than a Republican vote dump. Because right now, Democrats don't have a chance in this 1st district. And Democrats are saying very clearly that they are going to be considering this option, and it is very possible, given the supermajorities that Democrats have in the state legislature, even if the Maryland Court of Appeals, with Maryland now renamed, we had a ballot initiative on this, to now the Supreme Court of Maryland. If this, does get overturned by the Supreme Court of Maryland, nothing is stopping the Democratic supermajority from using their supermajority to impeach and remove members of the Maryland court. Now, that's not something that's being actively discussed, but it is an option. This is, again, a huge deal for the Democratic Party nationwide, that Republicans are redrawing their maps left and right, and Democrats are left to defend themselves with just the state of California, and other states are considering it too from the right. Florida, with Governor Ron DeSantis saying that we need a map where Democrats are losing 5 seats as well. Indiana and Missouri and Kansas openly floating and exploring this idea and retaliation against the Democratic Party. And it's not even really retaliation. Texas is the state that started it. California responded, and now it's this tit-for-tat, blown-out war. And you're going to find that Governor Wes Moore in the state of Maryland, as someone who has been very open about being in the oppositional stance against Donald Trump and his administration and Republicans nationwide, is exploring this option as well. This started about half a month ago. I made a video talking about Maryland, about Democrats in the state legislature, in the state assembly, saying that they were going to consider redrawing the maps, that there were provisions in place and that they were exploring their legal options. But Governor Wes Moore had not explicitly said that these are things that are being actively considered, at least not to the same degree that he said in an interview yesterday. And so obviously it made news. It's a big piece of legislation. If it was to undergo and go through the Democratic majority, undoubtedly would be faced with legal battles that I'm sure they would elevate and try to maneuver and might end up getting through. Because what the judge said in 2022, when they struck down this map on March 25th, was that, first of all, this is a Democratic judge. And so this is someone who Democrats were not expecting to strike down their map. But the opinions, I believe, of many Democrats across the country has radically changed in the aftermath of states like Texas redrawing their maps and Donald Trump's involvement in federal redistricting and this process entirely, that a lot of them might be willing, maybe not necessarily to green light it and give it the stamp of approval, but maybe not take up the case. Might just say, defer to the legislature. This is not something that the judges need to be involved with. And that's because, again, there's this new brewing appetite from a lot of these Democratic elected officials, appointed officials, that has been a part of the Democratic base for years on end of fighting fire with fire. It is this hands-on approach the Democrats are finally waking up to. And Maryland is no different. It's a state that has the opportunity, one of the few states in the country, the only states that really have the opportunity to do this through the legislature are Illinois and Maryland. And Illinois is already drawn in an excessively strong Democratic gerrymander. Sure, they could go for more, and there is a chance that they might. But Maryland has yet to instigate this. And again, this was the court-drawn map approved by the legislature, right? Or somewhere around there. You were finding that the court said you need a Republican vote, gerrymandering is wrong. And because Maryland's constitution doesn't explicitly prohibit gerrymandering by name, there's a lot of interpretation there, meaning another judge could take up the case and rule entirely differently. That a court of appeals, or rather, the state Supreme Court, under the threat or even just perceived threat of impeachment and removal from office over something that is largely inconsequential in the grand scheme of things to them, might rule very differently than a Democratic judge who's coming off the 2020 election saying, we just campaigned on gerrymandering being wrong, why are we doing it? And so, the very different circumstances of 2022 versus 2025. And it will be interesting to see exactly how the Maryland Democrats really navigate such an intense and important process for the 2026 midterms. Because if Democrats do axe out Andy Harris, you're losing a pretty big player in the House Freedom Caucus. You're losing a pretty big and notable member of the House GOP. And so he's the chair, huge involvement, has been in office since the 2010 midterms, had been in elected office way before that. He's someone who is a very well-known name in Republican politics, at least in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Makes a big deal. If he is drawn out, Republicans are going to lose one of their heavy hitters. Andy Harris helps lead Republicans in many ways to getting concessions from Donald Trump and other Republicans in the House because of the power the Freedom Caucus has. If they withhold their votes, the House majority is so slim, as we know, that without them, the Republicans won't pass a single piece of legislation. So obviously, they have to capitulate. Looking at the state of Maryland, though, if they draw him out, and let's say the district becomes even, he doesn't win. He is only able to do so well because the district he represents is made for that. The district he represents voted for Donald Trump by 17 points. In 2022, voted against Wes Moore by 12 points when Wes Moore was winning the state by nearly 30. So to put things into context, this first district, again, as it has always intended to be, is a Republican vote dump. That if you pull over some of these D plus 36, D plus 22, D plus 63, portions of the state, and you draw a gerrymander just as one like we saw in 2018, it is very possible that it is the Republicans who lose this seat and Democrats ultimately end up netting one out of Maryland. And it would also remove, this is another side of it, it would remove the competitive nature of Maryland's 6th district. This is a district that Democrats have been spending a lot of money on, and if they don't have to, if they redraw the map, Republicans won't even be able to contest any of these seats. And Westmore, I think, as someone who says he's not going to run for president, but there's still a wide anticipation that he might be tapped for VP or that he might change his mind and run for president, will certainly be facing a lot of questions from the press, Democratic voters in the future. What was your response to Donald Trump? What did you do in your state that combated and effectively maneuvered an administration that was overextending its reach, that was going to states like Texas and saying, we need a new map? Did you, Governor Westmore, redraw your map? The answer could very well be yes by the end of the next midterm cycle. And that will be something that he can point to, that Maryland Democrats can point to, that other governors can point to. Because there's a big reason why you're starting to see people like Governor Kathy Hochul in the state of New York, who came off a last cycle in 22, where arguably her lackluster governor performance might have been a reason that Democrats did not do as well in the House of Representatives. She won by 6.4%, no matter how you cut it, no matter whether or not you like her. That is not a performance that Democrats should have been happy about. They knew that. After 2022, even the DCCC chair had lost his election in the state of New York. But the point is, they recovered. New map was drawn. Democrats got in a better position. But Democrats also have the opportunity ahead of 2028, not 26, but ahead of 2028 to redraw their congressional boundaries as well. And because Hochul is pushing back against Donald Trump to such a degree, her approval ratings are rising, up 10 points, in just a few months. Perception amongst Democrats has skyrocketed. A lot more Democrats are excited to vote for her again. There is an appetite for the actions that these candidates are doing, or that these governors are doing, that make people like them more. Because again, for a long time, Democrats have held, in terms of voting base, the mentality and mindset of fighting fire with fire and pushing back against the Republican opposition by any means necessary. Any means necessary. And it is only now that we are starting to see a lot of these Democratic officials really wake up to that idea. And it makes a lot of sense. Electorally, it's advantageous. For their future prospects, it's advantageous. At every point and to every set of circumstance, moves like this will have a ripple effect that ultimately do benefit not only these candidates, but the broader Democratic Party. Because I've seen a lot of talking points. People, even from the left, who have made arguments, I think that I've seen on Twitter. If Democrats continue down this, we lose the moral high ground on gerrymandering. Well, there is no point in having a moral high ground if you can't win an election. If Democrats fairly, had won in 2026, let's say hypothetically, but Republicans moved forward with their gerrymander and states like California and Maryland did not respond, Republicans would be up 8 to 12 more seats than they otherwise would have deserved based on the 2024 boundaries. That doesn't sound like a fair election. The moral high ground only goes so far, and clearly that's not what wins elections. If Republicans are willing to draw a state, I do think from a political perspective, Democrats look to this and say, well, we should draw the state differently because they are drawing their states that way. And Republicans say, well, we'll do it too. But there was no doubt that Republicans were going to do it anyway. After all, they are the ones who initiated this from the very, very beginning. Even going back to the 2020 census redraw, Republicans gerrymandered 100 more seats than Democrats because they gerrymandered 150 more seats in 2010, and it withstood the test of time through the decade, ushered them in state legislative victories so they could do it again in 2020. Anyways, going off on a bit of a tangent here, getting back and centering us around Maryland, the point is the Democrats are taking the gloves off. And even in states where it seems as if the Republican Party has already been squeezed to oblivion in the House delegation, Democrats are willing to twist the knife and take that final district away from the Republican Party in a meaningful way, because that's exactly what the GOP is doing to Democrats all across the country. And so we'll see. Maryland's 1st district under fire, a new congressional map might be among us. And as Governor Westmore looks to the future, has been saying now that all options are on the table, and it looks like Democrats might be moving forward with a congressional redraw in my home state of Maryland. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.